Gillingham, Rehman Chishti, is chairman of the Commons All-Party Group on Community Engagement. He joins us live from Westminster. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, you set up that group last year. Was that because in the course of your work as an MP here in the South East, you thought there was a problem with community engagement, with the integration of ethnic minorities?
Well, look, the reason I founded the All-Party Group on Community Engagement was that it tied into the vision of the Prime Minister, a government for all. And as a result of that, it was important to go out there and engage to all sections of our community to ensure that they can achieve their true potential. And you can look at the challenges that they may have, but also to ensure that everyone's on the same page of respecting our British values of tolerance, of respect, of democracy and rule of law.
Indeed. In terms of radicalisation, I mean, the South East isn't particularly notorious. We've had jihadi terrorists from Crawley and Brighton here in recent years, but we're not known particularly as well as other parts of the country for that. Do you think there's a complacency in government as a result about the South East?
Well, no, not at all, actually. I think what we have a government which is working at every level to ensure that, the issues of radicalisation and extremism are dealt with. And I applaud the work of our intelligence agencies and the Metropolitan Police, and in particular the fantastic work of our communities. And I refer you to the comments of the Assistant Police Commissioner, Mr. Rowley, who said it's often members of the individual's own community who alert the police authorities about that individual's behaviour, which then allows the authorities to deal with that individual before they get sucked in from non-violent extremism to violent extremism.
Indeed. Well, sucked in brings me neatly to my next question, which was going to be about the radicalisation in prison of vulnerable prisoners. We know that's a problem. Adrian Elms, as he was born, was allegedly radicalised while serving time in jail. What can we do about that?
Well, look, there are a number of different ways in which somebody can get drawn into this poison ideology. We've talked about prisons, but equally at the same time, you have the issue of online radicalisation. At the same time, what you have is hate preachers. And it was this government, which deported Abu Qatada, Abu Hamza, and Abu Bakri, back out of this country. And I would say this, if we have individuals in our great country who are not prepared to accept our British values of tolerance and respect, then they should go and live elsewhere, and leave our great country to our great people and to get on with their lives. But you are right. There is a problem in prisons, and we do not know for certainty if this individual was radicalised in prison. But there is an issue with individuals who go into prison. They may go into prison with a different faith, but they may then go into prison and convert to Islam. And these individuals do not know what Islam is, which is a great religion, a peaceful religion. But they're disillusioned, they're vulnerable, they're disturbed, and there are people who manipulate them. And as a result of that, they come out there and at times very dangerous. And that's why we all have to come together to ensure that when we see those signs of these individuals being disillusioned, disturbed or dangerous, we alert the authorities. And it is not the responsibility of saying it's somebody else should do it. We all have a responsibility to alert the authorities because we are all in it together and we all have to work together.
Indeed. Rehman Chishti, the MP for Gillingham, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Rehman. This gentleman was taking issue with you.
I think the point was made earlier to say that, I was accused of not getting the point. But the point I was making with you is when my colleague to my right here says that this problem is made by the Home Secretary. What I'm saying to you is, look, the issue of radicalisation and extremism hasn't happened over the last 4 years. It's been going on for a very long time.
Since we started bombing Afghanistan, really,
not at all.
hasn't
It's been going on over a very long time, and under successive governments, it has to be dealt with. And the first duty of the state, whether it's a Labour government or a Conservative government, and God forbid a Lib Dem-led government, is to protect its citizens. That's your first duty. And I'm sorry, you may disagree with a foreign policy, but you have no reason to take up arms in another country.
If you let me
let me finish.
Hang on, Nellifer. Let me finish.
I think the idea is if you want to bring about change, you cannot use violence to do that. We have a system in our country. It's about democratic means. You elect members of parliament. Now, hang a minute. Look, hang a minute. You can't just shout at me from there. If you want to, look, I'll hear you. You hear me. That's democracy. The fact is, you elect members of parliament to go there, with the views. You ask them those questions that you have elected. Yeah, no, but you're not in my constituency. You're not in my constituency.
He was elected. He was elected.
You're not in my constituency. I'm elected.
I'm not in your constituency, though. I can only talk
Well, if you don't believe in the democratic system, what can I say?
You dislike it, but can you live
with it. Yeah, but or persuade the other person that they actually really like it.
Yeah, and I would say, look, at the end of the day, if you've got Tinder, which I know people have used,
I've done. Heard of it,
and
Tinder.
from what I hear, what people have used is you flick through. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
I want to say a word about the terminology we use to describe this evil death cult. Having carefully considered the strong representations made to me by the Honourable Member for Gillingham and Rainham, having listened to many members of Parliament across the House, I feel it's time to join our key ally France, the Arab League and other members of the international community in using as frequently as possible the terminology Daesh rather than ISIL. Let me give way to the Honourable Member for Gillingham and Rainham.
Well, Mr. Prime Minister, can I first of all thank you for that change in terminology and all members of Parliament across the House for their support in this. While the Prime Minister joined me in urging the BBC to review their bizarre policy when they wrote to me to say that they can't use the word Daesh because it would breach their impartiality rules. We are at war with terrorists, Prime Minister. We have to defeat their ideology, their appeal. We have to be united in that. Will you join me now in urging the BBC to review their bizarre policy?
Well, I agree with my honourable friend, and I've already...
Operation completely separate to Parliament.
For me, certainly, I think, look, we've got Parliament. It's iconic. It's part of our history. It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. And I think what we've got to do is ensure that, we do everything we can to maintain that. But if it needs to be, repaired and we need to reallocate elsewhere, the point that was made earlier about the civil service, the costing, moving MPs, I would say, the Queen Elizabeth Hall across the road would be the ideal way to make sure we don't have too much disruption.
We've got a new Prime Minister, and the new Prime Minister is able and I think should put her own vision forward. And she feels that grammar schools provide people a chance to achieve their true potential. I went to a high school which closed, to a grammar school, a girls' grammar school, sixth form.
Well, I heard. You were the only boy.
Class of 13 girls. Equality fast, I love that.
Tell us how many.
Well, in my class, there was like 13 girls in my history and politics class. Really?
Well, I think what we have to say is, if we look at the reports, I recently hosted General Sharif in Parliament on giving a lecture on Pakistan's perspective on fighting terrorism. There's been a 70% reduction in terrorist attacks in Pakistan, but what you have to take into account with Pakistan, it is a frontline state on the war on terror, where over 40,000 civilians have lost their lives and the military personnel. Fighting terrorism is not an easy task. Whether it's in Brussels, whether it's in Paris, whether it's Pakistan or Ankara, you have individuals who are relentless in wanting to kill innocent human beings. The government in Pakistan, the military, have to stand together to ensure that those evil entities are brought to account. But what I would say, the challenges in Pakistan are immense, like anywhere in the world, in fighting extremism. They have to address the issue of curriculums in schools to ensure it's more moderate. They have to deal with private television channels, which some promote extremism. And recently we saw the incident where the terrorist convicted Qadri was executed, and you had people being able to come on the street, extremists, and carry out rallies. That should have never happened. So today, that's in relation to one aspect of the strategy. The Prime Minister has called it Daesh first. But what we have in Syria is two evil entities, Assad and Daesh, and we haven't heard from the Prime Minister in relation to how we will address the other evil entity of Daesh, and equally the 70,000, Free Syrian Army forces. Well, these are the same forces which were being bombed day in, day out by the Russians not long ago. And the question about will they stand up now with the international community, with us, to defeat Daesh? So there are a number of issues, number of questions, and of course the post-conflict situation about transition to democracy in Syria, learning lessons from Libya. So there are a number of questions which I need to go away, look at, speak to my constituents about before I make my final decision. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, I applaud the government's continued commitment to infrastructure development, with 6,000 projects in the pipeline worth £480 billion. Can the government quickly and speedily take forward the Lower Thames crossing and extra investment in Kent roads, which will help provide more homes, jobs, businesses, and help people in Kent, Medway, and the Thames Gateway area?
I'm
grateful to my honourable friend, and I'm grateful to him for recognising the contribution that the government's made in increasing investment in infrastructure, the importance of that investment. We have consulted on proposals around a Lower Thames crossing. There were more than 47,000 responses to that consultation. Those are now being considered, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, will make his response to that consultation in due course.
Well, look, what we have to realise is that these strikes are completely unjustifiable, and they're wrong. Why are they unjustifiable? Why are they wrong? Well, they're carried out on a mandate 2 years ago, and also, if you look at the NUT, only 27% turnout, of the people who wanted to strike. That is completely wrong. Laws have to change in relation to strike action, because what happens is it disrupts people's daily lives. For example, today, people can't go to work because they have to look after their children or get childcare, and also affects our economy. It's wrong. And what I would say about Labour, Ed Miliband made it quite clear that he would support the government in dealing with public sector pay to deal with our deficit. However, because the unions made him the leader, because the unions pick his policies, because the unions pick his candidates, he can't stand up to them.
Used by a non-legally binding referendum that MPs have chosen to follow.
Well, look, what I would say in terms of how MPs reach their decisions, a matter for them. For me,
but it isn't if you get a three-line whip, is it?
Well, and that's where you take a principal position. I'll give you my example. When the Prime Minister came back from Europe, he then got his office to ring up members of Parliament and say, come and see the Prime Minister, and come with us, and freebies are offered, and to smooth your way forward. I then said to the Prime Minister's office, I will come and see the Prime Minister. Of course I will. I was a parliamentary private secretary to the Attorney General, and I said, look, but I'll speak to the Prime Minister after I've done my public meetings in my constituency. Right. So I then wrote to the Prime Minister.
Just to be clear, this is David Cameron when he came back.
David Cameron, when he came back.
Wonderful job written on the back of the fact.
Where he came back with absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. But, to be fair, when they said come and see the Prime Minister, my first duty is to my constituents.
Interesting.
So I wrote to the Prime Minister's office in April saying, I've now more or less completed my public meetings, town hall meetings, around the constituency, and it was a clear 65% out.
What would you have done? Rehman, what would you think? Do you think the Queen, Her Majesty, should make Jonathan saying he's a racist? He is the elected head of state to be of the world's biggest democracy.
I think there's something different called when you're running for office and when you're in office in terms of the decisions you say.
You were a racist before and you're not a racist after.
But what I would say, Jonathan, I agree with you. There was a lot what he said which I totally disagree with. For example, saying he would ban all Muslims from entering the United States. Does that mean I would not be able to go to the United States? And I would say the words of the most powerful person in the world are important, and I tell you why I say that. His words, those words, created a perception of war between civilization and Islam, when at the moment there is a war between civilization and evil and death cult. And therefore, Daesh, looked at those words and took them further by saying, hey, they don't want you anyway, come to us, applying to the disillusion who get sucked into this poison ideology. His words, which he said before, were completely unacceptable. Okay, but we have to deal with reality. He is now the President. Well, what I want the Foreign Secretary to say, publicly and openly, to say the actions taken place by the President of the United States by executing the order which he did, banning people from certain countries with a Muslim background coming into the United States, is completely discriminatory, and it stands against our British values of tolerance, respect and freedom. But also, those actions feed into the hands of extremists and terrorists like Daesh and Al-Qaeda, and therefore make our world more of a dangerous place.
सर मैंने एक स्पीकर साहब की पार्लियामेंट को ये कहा है कि मैं एक डिबेट करना चाहता था कि पाकिस्तान और ब्रिटानिया के जो रिलेशनशिप हैं उसके मुताबिक ब्रिटानिया पाकिस्तान की क्या सपोर्ट कर सकता है